The crimson sky of Kelleris Prime burned with the fires of a dying world. Commander Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the UDS Ranger, his weathered hands gripping the console as the distress signal crackled through the speakers for the 100th. Time, please, anyone who can hear this. The Vorthok Hive has taken 4 of our worlds. We are farmers, not warriors. Our children. They're taking our children for harvest. The Galactic Council has abandoned us. We have maybe days before... The transmission cut to static like a knife through silence. Hyunwoo felt his heart sink deeper with each replay. He had been monitoring deep space frequencies for 12 years, but nothing had ever hit him like this desperate plea from the outer rim. The bridge of the Ranger hummed with tension. Communications officer Minna wiped tears from her eyes as she fine-tuned the receivers, hoping to catch more fragments of the Kalari transmission. Her fingers trembled over the controls. She had 2 young nephews back on Earth, and the thought of alien children being harvested made her stomach turn. Chief Engineer Taiho, a mountain of a man who usually grumbled about everything, stood frozen at his station. His tools hung limp in his massive hands. Even he, who had seen 3 wars and countless battles, looked shaken by the raw terror in that alien voice. "Sir," whispered Navigator So Young, her voice barely audible over the ship's ambient noise. She clutched a data pad with trembling fingers. "I just got word from Command. The Kalari system is 3 months through uncharted space. The Galactic Council has officially deemed it non-strategic." The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Non-strategic. A fancy way of saying those people would die alone while politicians counted credits and calculated risks. Hyunwoo closed his eyes and leaned against his command chair. The leather was worn smooth from years of his grip during countless missions. In his mind, he could hear his daughter Jiun's laughter from their last video call. She was only 8, with bright eyes that saw wonder in everything. Somewhere in the cold vacuum of space, alien children her age were crying for parents who would never come home. "Sir," Minna spoke up, her voice stronger now. "I've been analyzing the transmission patterns. The Vorthok ships, they're not just attacking. They're systematically harvesting entire populations. Men, women, children. The Kalari weren't exaggerating." Taeho slammed his wrench down on his workbench, the sound echoing through the bridge like a gunshot. "Damn politicians," he growled, "sitting in their comfortable chairs while innocent people get slaughtered." Hyunwoo opened his eyes and looked at his crew. These people had followed him through asteroid fields and hostile territories. They had faced down pirates and smugglers without flinching. But this was different. This wasn't about territory or resources. This was about something deeper. "Get me Admiral Jin Ho," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of command. Priority 1 encryption. So Young's fingers flew over her navigation console. "Sir, with respect, even if the Admiral approves a mission, we're talking about a 3-month journey through completely uncharted space. No supply lines, no backup, no rescue if things go wrong. And prep the long-range communicators," Hyunwoo continued as if she hadn't spoken. "We're calling in every favor humanity has." The next few hours blurred together in a whirlwind of activity. Admiral Jin Ho's weathered face appeared on the main screen within minutes of Hyunwoo's call. The old man listened to the recordings, without interruption, his expression growing darker with each passing second. "The Council's already written them off," Jin Ho said finally. "Officially, I can't authorize a military response." "And unofficially?" Hyunwoo asked. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then a ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "Unofficially, you're on extended patrol. And if some other ships happen to join you on this patrol, well, space is a dangerous place. Ships need to stick together." The response was overwhelming. Captain Yunji of the Guardian volunteered immediately, her voice crackling over the comm with fierce determination. "My grandmother always said the measure of a person isn't what they do when someone's watching, but what they do when nobody..." Captain Donghyun of the Courage didn't even hesitate. "Count us in. We didn't join the Defense Force to watch innocent people die." One by one they came. The Defender with its veteran crew of former asteroid miners. The Protector crewed, mostly by volunteers who had lost family to alien raiders. The Valor and the Honor sister ships whose captains were actual siblings who refused to let each other fight alone. 7 ships total. Not the massive fleet that military doctrine demanded for such a mission, but 7 ships full of people who couldn't stand by and do nothing. As the small fleet prepared to jump into hyperspace, Hyunwoo stood before the main view screen watching Earth shrink behind them. Minna had patched the Kalari distress signal through the ship's internal comm system one more time. Every crew member heard those desperate words echoing through the corridors. "Attention all hands," Hyunwoo announced over the ship-wide intercom. "We are embarking on a journey that may be our last. We're heading into unknown space to help people we've never met, for no reward except knowing we did what was right. History may never record what we do out there, but somewhere in the darkness children are crying for help, and as long as humans draw breath, no one cries for help alone." The 7 ships engaged their hyperspace drives simultaneously, their combined energy signatures lighting up the void like newborn stars. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, unaware that some of its children were racing toward destiny among alien worlds. Ahead lay 3 months of uncertainty, danger, and the unknown horrors of the Vorthak hive. But for the 2,100 souls aboard those 7 ships, there was no question about their choice. They carried with them humanity's greatest strength, not superior weapons or advanced technology, but something the galaxy had rarely seen: the unshakable belief that every life matters, regardless of species or origin. The stars stretched into lines as they jumped to hyperspace, beginning their long journey toward a world they'd never seen, for people they'd never met, armed with nothing but courage and the stubborn human refusal to abandon those in need. 3 months of hyperspace. Travel had felt like an eternity, but nothing could have prepared the human fleet for what awaited them at Kalaris Prime. As the 7 ships dropped out of hyperspace, their crews stared in horror at the devastation before them. The planet that had once been a jewel of green farmlands and crystal blue oceans was now a dying husk. Brown scars stretched across continents where lush forests had stood just months ago. The oceans had turned a sickly grey colour, choked with the debris of harvested cities. Smoke plumes rose from 1,000 points across the surface, marking the spots where entire civilizations had been stripped away. Commander Hyunwoo gripped his command chair so hard, his knuckles turned white. Through the main view screen, he could see the true horror of the Vorthak hive in action. Massive ships, each one the size of Manhattan, hung in orbit like metallic vultures. Their black hulls pulsed with an organic rhythm that made them look more like living creatures than spacecraft. Bioluminescent veins ran along their surfaces, glowing with an eerie green light that seemed to pulse with malevolent intelligence. Between the massive motherships, hundreds of smaller harvester vessels scuttled like insects. These ships were grotesque combinations of metal and flesh, their hulls sprouting tentacle-like appendages that could grab and crush anything in their path. Through the reinforced viewports of their cargo holds, the human crews could see the silhouettes of countless prisoners packed together like cattle. "Sir," Tactical Officer Jamin's voice cracked as he read his instruments. His face had gone pale, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the bridge's cool temperature. "I'm reading 67 enemy vessels. The largest ones are registering energy signatures off our charts. We're outnumbered 10 to 1, and that's not counting the smaller drones." The communications array suddenly came alive with intercepted hive transmissions. Minna quickly patched them through the bridge speakers, and the crew listened in growing horror to the alien voices coordinating their harvest operations. The Vorthak language sounded like a mixture of insect clicks and mechanical grinding, utterly inhuman and cold. "They're not just taking people," Minna whispered, her fingers trembling over her console. "They're cataloguing them, sorting them by age, size, genetic compatibility. It's like they're running some kind of biological processing plant." Captain Yunji's face appeared on the main communication screen, transmitted from the bridge of the Guardian. Her usually composed features were set in grim determination, but Hyunwoo could see the fear in her eyes. Behind her, her crew was frantically preparing weapon systems and checking shield generators. "Hyunwoo," she said, her voice steady despite the impossible odds they faced. "We knew this was going to be a one-way trip when we left Earth. The question is, how do we make our deaths count? What are your orders?" Before Hyunwoo could formulate a response, the communication system crackled with a new transmission. This voice was different from the harsh Vorthak chatter. It was melodic, almost musical, but filled with desperate exhaustion. Unknown vessels. Unknown vessels. This is Kalari's sanctuary ship, Hope's Dawn. The voice belonged to someone whose world was ending, but who still dared to hope. We detect your approach vectors. Are you... Please tell me you're here to help us. We have 17,000 refugees aboard, mostly children and elderly. Our engines are failing and the hive ships are closing in. Through the tactical display, Yunwu could see the Kalari ship. It was barely holding together, pieces of hull plating missing and makeshift repairs visible across its surface. Several Vorthak harvesters were moving to intercept it, their predatory forms closing in like sharks sensing blood in the water. Yunwu looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These people had followed him across 3 months of dangerous space, trusting his judgment completely. Now they were staring death in the face, and they were still looking to him for leadership. "All ships, this is Ranger," he announced over the fleet communication channel. His voice carried across 7 bridges to 2,100 human souls who had volunteered for this moment. "We didn't come here to win a battle against impossible odds. We didn't come here to be heroes or to make the history books. We came here to save lives, and that's exactly what we're going to do." He paused, watching as the Vorthak ships began to turn toward the human fleet, their sensors finally detecting the new arrivals. Pattern Delta formation. All ships protect the civilian vessels. Draw their fire, create confusion, and give those refugees every second we can buy them. Let's show these bugs what humans do when innocent people are threatened. The 7 human ships suddenly burst into action, their engines flaring to life as they dove toward the planet. The Ranger led the charge, its weapons systems lighting up the darkness of space with brilliant energy discharges. Behind it, the Guardian and Defender split off to flanking positions, while the Protector and Valor moved to shield the struggling Kalari refugee ship. The Vorthak response was immediate and overwhelming. The massive motherships began, launching swarms of fighter drones, each one moving with insect-like precision. Energy beams lanced through space, missing the human ships by mere meters as their pilots performed desperate evasive maneuvers. "Hope's Dawn. This is Commander Hyunwoo of the Earth Defense Force," he transmitted to the Kalari ship. "We're going to get you out of here. Follow our lead and don't stop moving no matter what happens." The battle was chaotic and desperate. From the first moment, human ships darted between the massive hive vessels like minnows swimming among whales, their weapons targeting the harvesters that threatened civilian ships rather than engaging the larger threats. Every shot fired, every maneuver executed, was designed not to inflict maximum damage on the enemy, but to save maximum lives among the innocent. As the Courage swooped low to intercept a group of Vorthak fighters pursuing a damaged Kalari transport, Captain Dong-hyun's voice crackled over the comm. "This is what we came for, people. Every refugee ship that escapes is a victory. Every child that lives to see another day makes this all worthwhile." The 7 human ships had entered a battle they couldn't win, but they fought it anyway because, somewhere in the darkness of space, innocent people needed help. And that was all the reason they needed. The first day of battle was absolute chaos. Space around Kalari's Prime erupted into a deadly dance of plasma fire and twisted metal, as the 7 human ships threw themselves against an enemy that outnumbered them 10 to 1. The Vorthak hive ships moved with terrifying precision, their organic hulls rippling as they fired weapons that seemed to bend the very fabric of space. The Ranger shuddered as a massive energy beam scorched across its hull, leaving a glowing scar in the armor plating. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles as the bridge crew fought to keep their ship operational. Commander Hyunwoo wiped blood from a cut on his forehead, his eyes never leaving the tactical display where dozens of red dots represented enemy ships. "Closing in from all directions. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Taeho over the comm, his voice barely audible over the sound of emergency alarms. "Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we've lost life support to the aft section, the hive." Ships were faster than anything the humans had ever encountered. Their fighters moved like living creatures, twisting and turning in impossible directions as they pursued the refugee ships. But what they hadn't expected was the sheer stubbornness of human determination. When 3 Vorthak harvesters cornered a limping Kalari transport near the planet's second moon, the Guardian came screaming out of nowhere. Captain Yunji pushed her ship's engines beyond their safety limits, the hull groaning under the stress as she positioned her vessel between the aliens and their prey. "This is Guardian," she shouted over the fleet channel. "I don't care how many of you bugs there are. You want those civilians, you'll have to go through us first." The Guardian opened fire with everything it had, its weapon systems blazing like a miniature sun. The Vorthak ships returned fire immediately, their organic weapons spitting globules of corrosive plasma that ate through the human ship's armor like acid. But Yunji held her position, taking hit after hit, while the Kalari transport limped away to safety. Meanwhile, the Courage was fighting its own desperate battle near the planet's North Pole. Captain Dong Hyun had been escorting a convoy of 17 refugee ships when a massive Vorthak destroyer dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path. The alien ship was 3 times larger than any human vessel, its hull bristling with weapons that could vaporize a city. "All refugee ships, this is Courage," Dong Hyun commanded. "Break formation and scatter. We'll keep this thing busy." But as the Courage engaged the destroyer, disaster struck. A direct hit from the alien ship's main weapon overloaded the human vessel's power core, leaving it drifting dead in space. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the bridge as the crew realized their situation. "Sir, main power is gone," reported his engineer. "We're running on backup batteries only. Weapons are offline, engines are dead, and life support is failing." Through the viewport, Dong Hyun could see the Vorthak destroyer turning toward the fleeing refugee ships. In minutes, it would catch up to them, and 8,000 innocent civilians would be harvested. He looked around at his crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that burned in his own heart. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We came here to save lives, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Engineering, I need you to manually override the engine safeties. Weapons crew, prepare for manual firing of all remaining missiles. We're going to ram that thing." The crew of the Courage worked frantically in the dark, using emergency power tools to bypass safety systems and manually activate their ship's engines. They had maybe one chance to build up enough speed to damage the destroyer before it could pursue the refugees. "Courage, what's your status?" came Hyunwoo's voice over the comm. "We're going to clear the path for those civilians, Commander." Dong Hyun replied calmly, "It's been an honor serving with you." The Courage suddenly roared back to life, its engines blazing as it accelerated toward the massive Vorthak destroyer. Every missile tube fired simultaneously, creating a brilliant fireworks display as the human ship made its final charge. The destroyer's weapons blazed in response, but it was too late. The Courage slammed into the alien vessel's midsection with the force of a small asteroid, the explosion lighting up the darkness like a newborn star. Back on the Ranger, Min-Ah watched her instruments with tears streaming down her face. "Courage is down," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I'm not reading any life signs." "Noted," Hyunwoo replied, his voice like tempered steel. He couldn't afford to mourn now, not while there were still lives to save. Their sacrifice just saved 8,000 civilians. "Yunji, take your ship low. Those harvesters are trying to cut off the southern refugee convoy." The battle raged for 3 days without pause. The human ships fought with a desperation that the Vorthak had never encountered before. When the Defender lost its main engines, Chief Gunner Sung-ho kept firing the weapons manually, using backup power and sheer determination to hold off alien fighters while repair crews worked frantically to restore power. The honor was held, together by emergency patches and the prayers of its crew. Half of its hull plating had been blown away, exposing the ship's internal structure to the vacuum of space. But Captain Ju-won refused to retreat, using his crippled ship as a mobile shield to protect refugee convoys. By the end of the 3rd day, the human fleet was battered almost beyond recognition. The Defender drifted powerless through space, its crew manning the guns with hand-cranked mechanical systems. The Veiler had lost its entire forward section, but kept fighting from its rear compartments. The Protector was leaking atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches, its crew wearing emergency suits as they continued their desperate mission. But somehow, impossibly, they were winning. Not against the Hive fleet. They were still vastly outnumbered and outgunned, but they were winning the only battle that truly mattered, the race to save innocent lives. Every hour they held out meant more refugee ships escaped to safety. Every Vorthak vessel they destroyed or damaged meant fewer harvesters could pursue the fleeing civilians. "Sir," Navigator So Young called out, her voice tight with exhaustion and fear. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace signatures, Hive reinforcements inbound. It looks like their main battle fleet." Hyunwoo studied the tactical display, watching as 300 new contacts appeared on the screen. Each one represented a ship capable of destroying his entire fleet single-handedly. The main Vorthak battle fleet was arriving to finish what the advance force had started. He looked around his bridge at his crew. Minar was still at her station despite a bandaged arm. Taeho had burn marks on his uniform from fighting fires in the engine room. So Young's face was pale with exhaustion, but her hands remained steady on the controls. "Well," he said softly, a ghost of a smile crossing his lips. "I guess we're about to find out what humans are really made of." The 7 human ships, battered and broken but still fighting, prepared to face odds that would have made gods weep. They had come to save lives, and they would keep fighting until their last breath, because that was what it meant to be human. The massive Vorthak battle fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of mechanical death, their sleek black hulls gleaming with anticipation of easy victory. Fleet Commander Zekthul had come to witness the final harvest of Calaris Prime and to collect the wreckage of whatever foolish species had dared interfere with Hive operations. What he found instead made his compound eyes widen in disbelief. The human ships were indeed destroyed. The Ranger looked like it had been through a metal shredder, its hull held together by welded patches and prayer. The Guardian was missing its entire port side, emergency force fields the only thing keeping atmosphere inside. The Defender drifted without main power, its crew visible through breached sections as they manually operated weapons systems. But they were still fighting. As Zekthul watched through his command screen, the Defender opened fire with weapons that shouldn't have existed. Where once sleek military cannons had been mounted, now crude but effective launchers fired what appeared to be modified agricultural equipment. The projectiles struck a Hive cruiser and immediately began eating through its organic hull with chemical reactions that made the alien ship writhe in agony. "What are those weapons?" demanded Zekthul of his tactical officer. "Analysis shows fertilizer canisters, Commander, modified with corrosive compounds typically used for soil treatment. The humans have somehow weaponized farming equipment." On the Defender, Chief Engineer Park had worked for 18 hours straight with a team of Kalari agricultural specialists to create their improvised weapons. "If these bugs want to harvest our friends," he had growled while welding together the makeshift launcher, "let's give them a taste of what farmers really think about pests." The Honor was perhaps the most bizarre sight in the entire battle zone. What had once been a sleek military vessel now resembled a patchwork quilt floating through space. Hull plating from dozens of different refugee ships had been welded, bolted, and somehow held together to create a vessel that defied every law of aerospace engineering. Kalari organic composites mixed with Zephyrian crystal matrices and human steel alloys in a combination that should have torn apart under its own structural stress. But it flew. More than that, it fought. Captain Ju Won stood on his rebuilt bridge, surrounded by control panels salvaged from mining ships, agricultural transports, and even a luxury yacht. His crew included not just humans, but Kalari farmers who had insisted on staying to help repair the ship that had saved their families. "Sir," called out his makeshift communications officer, a young Kalari named Veltar whose family had been among the first rescued, "the big ugly bug ships are hailing us. They want to know how we're still operational." "Tell them," Juwon said, with a grin, "that this is what happens when farmers get angry." But the biggest shock for the Vorthak fleet commander came when his sensors detected dozens of new contacts approaching from multiple vectors. These weren't reinforcements for the Hive. These were ships coming to join the humans. Unknown human vessels, came a transmission in carefully pronounced but heavily accented English. "This is Captain Thelara of the Kalari Defense Force. We wish to fight beside you." The transmission came from a converted agricultural ship that had been hastily fitted with whatever weapons the Kalari could find. Behind it came more ships, a ragtag fleet of farmers and merchants who had watched the humans sacrifice everything to save their people. More voices joined the communication channel. "This is Captain Zix of the Zephyrian trader vessel, Crystal Wind. We stand with the humans." The crystalline beings had loaded their cargo ships with explosive mining charges, turning merchant vessels into improvised bombers, Altarian mining. "Consortium vessel, Deep Digger reporting for duty," came another voice. "These bugs destroyed our mining colonies. Time for payback." Most shocking of all was the next transmission. "This is Commander Velnon of the Galactic Council cruiser Justice's Edge. My crew has voted to disobey our retreat orders. We will not abandon those who fight for justice." Commander Hyunwoo listened to the growing choir of voices offering their support, feeling something he hadn't experienced in days: hope. He looked around his damaged bridge at his exhausted crew, then at the tactical display showing dozens of ships converging on their position. "All Allied vessels," he transmitted, his voice carrying across the improvised fleet. "This is Commander Hyunwoo of the Human Defense Fleet. Welcome to the party." What followed was a battle unlike anything in galactic history. The Vorthak fleet, designed for systematic conquest and efficient harvesting, found themselves facing an enemy that operated on completely different principles. When the Protector lost its main weapon to a direct hit, Kalari engineer Veltar didn't retreat to safety. Instead, he crawled through damaged corridors, carrying a high-powered agricultural laser designed for clearing forests. Working alongside human technicians, they jury-rigged the farming equipment to the ship's power core, creating a weapon that could slice through hive armor like butter. "This is for my daughter," Veltar shouted as he fired the improvised weapon, the agricultural laser carving through a Vorthak destroyer's hull. The Valor had exhausted its ammunition after 2 days of constant fighting, its missile tubes empty, and its energy weapons drained. But the ship's captain, Kim Jae-won, refused to withdraw. Instead, he watched as Zephyrian pilots in their crystalline cargo vessels began deliberately ramming hive ships, their vessels exploding in brilliant displays of light and determination. "If they can do that," Jae-won announced to his crew, "so can we. All hands prepare for ramming speed." But before he could make the ultimate sacrifice, the Altarian miners had a different idea. Their ships, designed for deep space excavation, began using their mining lasers to carve chunks of asteroids and hurl them at hive vessels with magnetic accelerators. The improvised artillery turned the battlefield into a storm of stone and metal. The Vorthak fleet commander Zekthul watched his tactical display with growing confusion and alarm. His ships were designed for precision strikes against specific targets. His crews were bred for efficiency and calculated aggression. But how do you fight an enemy that turns farming equipment into weapons? How do you defeat ships held together by friendship and determination? "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "the human vessels are using completely irrational strategies. They're protecting civilian ships instead of engaging our primary targets. They're sacrificing strategic advantages to save individual lives. It makes no tactical sense." Zekthul stared at the chaotic battle unfolding before him. Hive doctrine had always worked because it was based on simple principles: overwhelming force, efficient harvesting, systematic destruction. But these humans and their unlikely allies weren't following any recognizable patterns. When a hive cruiser cornered a damaged refugee ship, 3 different vessels immediately moved to intercept, regardless of their own tactical positions. When a human ship was overwhelmed, alien vessels with no military training threw themselves into the fight. It was chaos, but it was chaos with a purpose that the hive couldn't comprehend. The battle raged through the night cycle, ships held together, by spare parts and determination, facing off against the hive's finest warriors. Every time the Vorthak thought they had gained an advantage, some impossible act of courage or creativity turned the tide. The hive, bred for efficiency and conquest, couldn't understand enemies who fought not for territory or resources, but for the simple principle that no one should die alone, and that misunderstanding was becoming their greatest weakness. On the seventh day of battle, something impossible was happening. The massive Vorthak fleet, which had arrived with 300 warships expecting an easy victory, was retreating. Their sleek black vessels, each one a masterpiece of destruction, were pulling back from a ragtag collection of damaged human ships and hastily converted civilian vessels. Fleet Commander Zekthul stood on his command bridge, his multiple eyes scanning the tactical displays in disbelief. His fleet had lost 47 ships to an enemy that shouldn't have been able to destroy even one. Worse than the losses was the complete breakdown of hive tactics. His crews were reporting impossible things, human ships that continued fighting. After being declared destroyed, alien civilians who had somehow become effective warriors, and battle strategies that made no logical sense but somehow worked. "Commander," his tactical officer buzzed through the organic communication network, "our harvesting operations have been completely disrupted. The human interference has allowed over 200,000 Kalari to escape. The operation is a total failure." Zekthul's mandibles clicked in frustrated anger. The hive had never failed to complete a harvest once it had begun. Never in 5,000 years of galactic conquest had they been forced to retreat from such inferior opposition. That's when Admiral Jinho's voice crackled across every communication channel in the system. The old human's transmission was being broadcast from a Earth Defense Command vessel that had just dropped out of hyperspace, accompanied by a full fleet of human reinforcements. "This is Admiral Jinho of the Earth Defense Command," came the calm, authoritative voice. "We're reading a lot of chatter out there about some kind of ultimate weapon. Well, you found it." Zekthul immediately opened a communication channel, his translator converting his insectoid clicks into harsh, mechanical words. "Your ships are destroyed, human. Your weapons are primitive compared to our technology. Your forces are pathetically small. What ultimate force do you speak of?" The laugh that came back across the channel made every hive warrior pause. It wasn't the sound of a defeated enemy or a desperate bluff. It was warm, proud, and absolutely confident. "Look around you." "Bug," Jinho replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. 7 human ships came to this system to die for people we'd never met. People whose names we couldn't even pronounce, whose faces we'd never seen. Now look at what's happened. Zekthul did look, and what he saw made his compound eyes widen, in shock. The tactical display showed nearly 200 vessels of every conceivable design surrounding his fleet. Kalari agricultural ships bristling with improvised weapons, Zephyrian crystal haulers converted into bombers, Altarian mining vessels using their industrial equipment as artillery, even sleek Galactic Council ships whose crews had apparently mutinied against their own government's orders. "Our ultimate force isn't a weapon," Jinho continued, his voice now broadcasting across the entire star system. "It's the fact that when good people are in trouble, humans will cross the galaxy to help them. And apparently, we're not the only ones who think that's worth fighting for." On the bridge of the battered Ranger, Commander Hyunwoo listened to his admiral's words with tears in his eyes. Around him, his bridge crew stood at their stations, many of them bandaged and exhausted, but all of them proud. Through the viewports, he could see the impossible sight of species that had never worked together before fighting side by side. A young Kalari engineer named Pelthan was working alongside Chief Engineer Tai Ho to repair the Ranger's engines, their 4 hands and 2 hands working in perfect coordination, despite never having met before this battle. In the corridors, human marines were teaching Zephyrian traders how to use emergency repair equipment, while Altarian miners shared their knowledge of explosive techniques with anyone who would listen. "Sir," Navigator So Young reported, her voice filled with wonder, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the Hive fleet. They're preparing to jump to hyperspace." Zekthul made his decision. The Hive had rules about acceptable losses, and this operation had exceeded every parameter. More importantly, something about this human response terrified him on a level he couldn't understand. The Hive conquered through fear and overwhelming force, but these humans had created something that their greatest tactical computers couldn't. "Analyze hope. All Hive vessels," he transmitted to his fleet. "Operation termination. Retreat to hyperspace immediately. The remaining Vorthak ships began disappearing in flashes of twisted space-time, their retreat so rapid it looked almost like panic. Within minutes, the massive fleet that had terrorized this system for months was gone, leaving behind only the debris of their destroyed vessels and the impossible sight of a united galaxy. As the last hive ship vanished, cheers erupted across the communication channels. Dozens of voices in dozens of languages celebrated victory against impossible odds. But on the Ranger, Commander Hyunwoo simply stood quietly, watching through his viewports as Kalari children played in the corridors alongside human engineers and Zephyrian pilots. The sight of those children, alive and laughing when they should have been harvested and processed, made every sacrifice worthwhile. Captain Dong Hyun and the crew of the Courage had died to save them. Countless others had risked everything for people they'd never met. "Minna," he said quietly to his communications officer, "send a message to Earth Defense Command. Tell them the mission is complete." "What should I say about our losses, sir?" she asked, her fingers hesitating over the controls. Hyunwoo thought about all the ships held together by spare parts and determination, all the species that had learned to work together, all the children who would live to see another day. "Tell them we didn't lose anything," he said finally. "We gained something the galaxy had forgotten, the knowledge that we're stronger together than apart." As the mixed fleet prepared to depart Kalaris Prime, now began the long work of rebuilding. But the Kalari wouldn't do it alone. Zephyrian traders offered their crystal technology for construction. Altarian miners volunteered their industrial equipment. Even some Galactic Council representatives quietly arrived to offer official aid, their governments having suddenly discovered that supporting humanitarian missions was politically popular. "Set course for home," Hyunwoo ordered his navigator. "We've got a report to file." But before the human ships could engage their hyperspace drives, one final transmission came from the planet below. It was broadcast on every frequency, translated into every language, sent by the Kellari Planetary Council to anyone who would listen. "To the humans of Earth, to the brave souls of all species who answered our call when no one else would," came the voice of an elderly Kalari leader. "We thank you. You came to us when our own galaxy had abandoned us. You showed us that in this vast dark universe we are not alone. We will never forget." Commander Hyunwoo smiled as he listened to the message. 7 human ships had come to this system, expecting to die. Instead, they had accomplished something far more important. They had reminded the galaxy what it meant to be alive. The human fleet engaged their hyperspace drives and disappeared into the stars, leaving behind a system full of impossible friendships and a galaxy that would never be quite the same. Humanity had revealed its ultimate weapon, and it wasn't technology or military might. It was the simple, stubborn belief that every life matters, regardless of species or origin. And that belief, it turned out, was more powerful than any weapon the universe had ever seen. The end.